Hi again, this is Ted Peters, and we're trying to understand ourselves when engaged in sinful activity. And we're turning now to step 5 out of 7, and this is the most subtle and the most difficult to get a hold of, but I think the most enriching of our 7 steps from innocence to radical evil. Recall that we begin number 1 with anxiety, and number 2 with unfaith. 3 is pride, 4 is concupiscence, now 5 is self-justification combined with scapegoating, and that will take us eventually to number 6, cruelty, and 7, blasphemy. Blasphemy is unique in the sense that we pursue evil in the name of evil. But now at number 5, self-justification and scapegoating, we pursue evil in the name of the good. We do that because we are at the preconscious level aware, just sort of on the perimeter of our consciousness, aware that we're going to die, we're going to drop from being into non-being. And we're also aware that no matter how proud we are or how successful we are in our concupiscence at drawing all things into our own sphere of possession, that these things will fail us. There are no pockets in a shroud. You can't take it with you. Except for one thing, the good. We think, without thinking about it, we think that the good is eternal. And so if we can somehow identify ourselves with the good, then when we die, somehow we last forever. Now, this is not a rational sequence of thoughts, but it's sort of at the level of assumption, and this guides, almost dictates, a certain mechanism of behavior that I call self-justification, and sometimes it involves scapegoating. Well, let's start with Adam and Eve. Okay? So remember, Eve now is talking with the serpent, who points to the tree with the forbidden fruit, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And Eve looks at the tree and sees that it is good to eat. Now that tells us that you and I are naturally attracted to what is good. That's a good thing. Now, I'd hate to think that we were not attracted to the good, but we are attracted to the good. Now, of course, you remember that Eve eats of this fruit. She gives some to Adam, and Adam eats, and a little time passes, and God comes walking through the Garden of Eden, and he doesn't see Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve, where are you? He calls out. Oh, we're over here hiding behind the bushes. Well, why are you doing that? Well, because we're naked and we didn't want you to be a divine voyeur and take a look at us in our nakedness. Well, God thinks for a minute, huh? Oh, Adam and Eve, did you eat the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? By this time, Adam and Eve are out front, and they're having a three-way conversation. Adam, did you do that? And Adam says, well, yeah, I did, but technically, it's not my fault. You see, Eve, the woman you gave me, she's the one that gave me the fruit and I ate of it. Oh. Eve is what Adam's saying true? Eve says, well, yeah, well, technically it's true, but you see, it's not my fault. It was the serpent who beguiled me. And then by implication, she says, and God, we know who made the serpent. You did. So Adam has blamed Eve, and Eve has blamed the serpent, and together they are blaming God. Well, let's just ponder that for a minute. Adam and Eve are drawing a line between good and evil. After all, they know the difference now. And they're putting themselves on the good side of the line. Well, who gets put on the evil side? Well, God does. And Martin Luther, who is interpreting this story in the book of Genesis, says, you know what? We human beings do this every day, all day long. And I'm suggesting that existentially we assume the good is eternal, and it's very important for us to identify ourselves with the good. So we are constantly drawing the line between good and evil, placing ourselves on the good side of the line, because at a level of consciousness below our consciousness, we assume the good is eternal. And if it's necessary, we will put somebody else on the evil side of the line. And we can justify performing violence against them because what we're doing is good, even if God is on the evil side of the line. And ponder this in ordinary conversation. Do we like to identify ourselves with what is good? Well, my mother always told me that I should stand up for the underdog. And I believe my mama, okay? Or you just raise an eyebrow when somebody uses a foul word or suggests something that's crude and indiscreet. Or in political rhetoric, when the first President George Bush decided to go to war against Iraq, he tried to persuade the American people that Iraq's leader was like, what? Adolf Hitler. And of course, we can go over and drop bombs and shoot people if we're killing the equivalent of Adolf Hitler. That makes us good. We're drawing the line between good and evil, and that president's country was on the good side of the line. This is daily fare in political rhetoric. We're on the good side of the line, and in the case of America's enemies, after our leaders have chastised them, we think that we're doing good by bombing and shooting and all of those kinds of things that wreak havoc, because after all, the evil needs to get destroyed in the name of the good. We call that scapegoating. The enemies of our country are scapegoats for uniting the American people in a single military cause. And the same goes with any other country that's doing the same thing, certainly. ISIS and beheading Coptic Christians and Syriac Christians, and committing all kinds of terrorist acts of violence, are doing it in the name of what? Allah be great? Of course, ISIS draws the line between good and evil, puts itself on the good side. We are on the evil side, and killing us is a good thing. Yeah, that's the way it works. And the one who gets slaughtered in this, either through gossip or war or genocide, we call the scapegoat, the visible scapegoat. Now, in another occasion, I'll talk about invisible scapegoats, but right now, the visible scapegoat is the one on the other side of the line that we draw between good and evil. Now, the curious thing about the Christian gospel is that when we draw a line between good and evil, God places the divine on the evil side. And here we are working so hard to make ourselves godly, and God is on the evil side. Jesus Christ becomes the scapegoat. St. Paul says Jesus Christ becomes sin. And so if you and I are working to get on God's side through self-justification, through identifying ourselves with the good, the irony is that God is willing to take the evil side of the line. Jesus says, oh, you want to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye? Well, you got a log in your own. Another way of saying that is we lie to ourselves. When we draw that line between good and evil and put somebody on the evil side, we're lying to ourselves. And the gospel points out the lie by saying, you're crucifying the scapegoat. And what is so important about the gospel is the message that you and I are justified by God's grace, not by landing with 2 feet on the good side of the line between good and evil. And if we're justified by God's grace and not by being on the good side of the line, then we don't have to malign the scapegoat and justify our violence against the scapegoat. In fact, we don't have to scapegoat at all. We can identify with the victims of our violence, just as God identified with each and every victim of human self-justification and violence in Jesus' suffering on the cross, where Jesus says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.